Hello, I'm Helen Lacey and I'm one of the historians at Mansfield College. I've been asked to record just a short chat for you so that you can see and hear a bit about Mansfield and about what it's like to study history here. Obviously, it's a bit different for everyone at the moment, and we usually welcome you to college and show you around the buildings, and you get to meet your tutors, hopefully see that we're fairly normal people. But it's a bit different and it's online at the moment. So what we thought we'd do is that I'd give you some details from my perspective as a tutor at Mansfield. And I've roped in one of our recent history graduates called Sara, who's going to say hi.
Hi, I'm Sara. I'm the Access Officer at Mansfield. And as Helen said, I graduated last year, having done history.
Great, thanks, Sara. So we're just going to have a bit of a conversation and hopefully you can get something out of that and just pick up some ideas in terms of applying or whether you want to apply to Mansfield. So yeah, I should say I'm Helen Lacey and I teach medieval history here, and that runs my teaching runs right from 1000 to 1500, and there's a broad, huge range of subjects within that. At the moment, my research focuses on an event called the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. If you want to look us up online, you can go to 1381.online and you can see all the new research we're doing and investigate all of the findings that we're coming up with. Also at Mansfield are two colleagues, Professor Catherine Gleadle. So she works on 19th century, particularly women's history and gender history. And another colleague called Roisin Watson, and she works on early modern religious history, in particular looking at the cultural and social impact of the Reformation in Germany. So between us, medieval, early modern and modern is covered. And the nice thing about history at Oxford is that if what you want to do isn't covered in your college in Mansfield, then you can go to another college. There are 38 other colleges to go to, and they can teach you any subject that you want to study pretty much. So that's the historians at Mansfield. I thought I'd just talk to you first of all about the structure of history in Oxford and how Mansfield as a college fits into that. So one of the things to bear in mind when you're applying to Oxford is that all subjects have a department. So as a historian, you'd belong to the history department, but you also belong to a college. So we're very much talking to you about the Mansfield College perspective within that. Sara, did you want to say anything before I move on about the college and how it fits with the department?
Yeah, so as you said, you are, a historian, so you're part of like a much wider group in the university. But I think the really nice thing about Mansfield is it's one of the smaller colleges. I think there's 75 undergraduates in each year, but there's kind of a substantial number of historians. So is it 8 or 9 usually? Yeah. And so although you're part of like the small college and you still get that nice community feel, you have enough people who are doing your subject to have that opportunity to work with different people on different papers and things. And yeah, as you said, it's really nice to, like in your first term, you usually have tutorials in college with one of the Mansfield tutors, and then you kind of get a bit adjusted to it, and then you might get sent to other colleges to do different papers, which is quite good because then you can, follow your interest a bit more and have the best person and like the person who's an expert in that paper be teaching you it.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the range of courses that are on offer, the history department in Oxford is one of the biggest in the country. So there's a vast number of papers that you can opt for. And as Sara said, you've got this kind of outline where you get to do a bit of British, European and world history. But then there are also chances, particularly as you go into your second and third year, to really specialise in what you want to look at. And it's worth mentioning that we've just recently completed a curriculum reform, which means we've brought in a lot of new subjects and new areas, new geographical areas to cover, new concepts to look at. So you can study gender history, you can study different kinds of histories of ethnicities, you can look at the history. There's a paper called India, Gandhi to the Green Revolution. There's USA, race, religion and civil rights. And yeah, so I think that it's about keeping the curriculum as current as possible and giving you access to global history, as well as the core European modules and British modules that we offer as well. Sorry, did you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think actually that's the thing that really appealed to me when I was looking at the different courses around the country. So like lots of other universities have loads of compulsory modules, which I didn't really want. I kind of wanted to be able to do a bit of different things, but also if there was something that I was really interested in, to be able to follow it. And I think that's what Oxford offers you. So if you wanted to keep your degree really general and, as you said, do papers like from all over the world or different themes, you could do that. But equally, if you wanted to focus it more, just like gender history, you can kind of do loads of papers that would match quite well together and kind of create that specialism, which I think is, yeah, it's really nice. And it means that, you know, each history degree, even within the same college, is so different. You don't have like two people, as I said, even at Mansfield, who will have done the exact same papers or combinations. And so you can make it as tailored to you as you would like.
I think it's true to say that a lot of people come in thinking that they've got a particular interest in maybe 16th century, the Tudors or something like that. And yes, you can pick up on that and follow that through your degree, but equally, because you get exposed to new material, you might end up then being really passionate about studying civil rights in the USA or history of sub-Saharan Africa. So, you know, these are really different kind of course combinations that you can put together.
And I think that the degree is really good at also kind of like pushing your notions of what history is. So often at school you learn history as in, this is the history of the Second World War, like this battle happened and this battle happened and this happened, and history is about memorizing facts. Whereas at Oxford they really like push you to think of the big conceptual questions that might not necessarily be about the specific detail or the events of like various historical periods, but especially with a paper like, you know, disciplines or approaches, they're kind of trying to get you to think about history in a much broader sense, which I think, you know, generally you feel like you get a lot out of it, even though it can be quite difficult because you haven't done anything like that before, even if you've been studying history for, you know, 7 years at school or whatever.
Yeah, picking up on that, I think that's important to note that actually you've got these papers to do with British history, European and world history, particular themes within the chronological span of history, but you've also got these papers, as Sara said, called approaches to history and disciplines of history, which pick up on those conceptual ideas, make you think about methods like comparative history, you know, comparing two different regions or two different time periods. And they ask you to think about things like Marxist history or post-structuralist, you know, linguistics and how it ties into history. So all of these conceptual ideas, as well as the actual chronological papers as well. There are also these papers that really let you focus in on the sources and have close scrutiny of texts or pictures, all different kinds of sources that we can use as historians, movies, film, theatre, all of those things we can use as our source material.
Something that people don't kind of give a history degree enough credit for. You are like learning a really wide range of skills. It's not just, you know, like source analysis. Having those different papers that are testing different things makes you quite like well-rounded and good at a range of different things. And that's something that I actually didn't expect. I kind of thought that history at university would mainly involve talking about what historians think and analysing primary sources, but it's like so much more than that. And it's, especially in the tutorial system, it really is about developing your own view kind of based on the information that you have and making well-informed and well thought out arguments, which is, you know, useful for whatever you're going to go and do in the future as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think picking up on what Sara said about the tutorial system as well, it's worth noting that one of the differences about Oxford versus somewhere else you might be thinking of applying to is that Oxford uses what we call the tutorial system as the core of its teaching. And by that we mean a really small group. So usually 2 students to 1 tutor, it might even be 1 student or 3 students, but, you know, really small group teaching where you sit for an hour with your tutor and you discuss maybe the essay that you've written that week, or you might give a short presentation. But that tutorial format is, I think, something that people really value when they come to Oxford, because it's that chance to discuss what you've been reading about that week with hopefully, you know, an expert in the field, and that you can both get a lot out of that, and you can really get that focused attention on you and your thoughts and your writing, that really helps you then move on and develop your own ideas, your own style, your ability to communicate. All of those things really are enhanced, I think, by the tutorial system. Alongside that, of course, we have lectures, which would be alongside most of the other historians at Oxford, so you get a chance to meet historians in other colleges. And we also have small group teaching called seminars or classes, where you might be with the other historians in your college, which is quite nice to have that, that kind of teaching. Or you might be with, again, students from other colleges who are brought together because you're taking that particular course. So that variety of teaching styles often suits a lot of people, I think, and it gives you both that focused attention to you, but also the chance to interact in slightly larger groups. So I think, you know, when you're considering Oxford, that's one of the things to bear in mind. Also, in Oxford, we work with 3 8-week terms, which might sound quite short, and it is short compared to some of the other colleges and universities that you'll be looking at. But of course, in those 8 weeks, we pack a lot in. So generally, I would say that they're short, but more intense than other places that I've certainly taught at elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, and actually to add to that, I think the history department, with the kind of curriculum reform you talked about earlier, has done really well in terms of balancing the focus on exams and coursework. So it's one of the departments that has the, you know, quite a significant percentage of coursework, which again is testing like a very specific type of skill. And it kind of gives you that balance between being able to take the time to, you know, work on a longer piece of work, and also having the ability to kind of perform well in exam setting. And I found that that was really helpful in the end, and both of them kind of helped one another. So like being able to have that time to think about a subject in great detail, I could then take that and apply it to my exams, and kind of vice versa. And yeah, I think that's something that people should think about, because people assume all subjects at Oxford are just assessed by exams at the end of your third year, which actually isn't true for history anymore.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we need to make that point clear, that if you're someone who wanted to diversify the way in which you're assessed, that you don't have to just be examined by the end of term, end of the 3 years. There'll be a few exams like that for everyone, but you can certainly add other elements. Well, you have to add elements like a dissertation, which is a longer piece of writing that you research yourself, and that's really something that often people find as one of the jewels in the crown of their degree, that they really enjoy that time to go off into the archives or work with material online to shape their own dissertation, and you can come up with your own question. Obviously, we help you to think of questions and ideas. You can do takeaway papers where you work on them at home, and as well as traditional exam format. So I don't think that you need to be put off if you're thinking of Oxford, in the sense, if you think that I'm not someone who favours all end of 3-year assessments, that we do actually have different forms within the degree.
Yeah, and you are so well supported when you're doing that. So as we both said, like you might be taking a paper with a tutor from another college, but on various occasions we would still come and see you or Catherine if we were having an issue with our like work. And so kind of having that support network in college with your college tutors is really nice, because you know you do get to know them quite well over the 3 years. And I think having someone that you know well and know when they're available, where you can go to see them, and that they will kind of take your issue, whatever it is, seriously, was kind of really reassuring to me, because as you said, it can be quite intense. So you know, if you fall behind on your work or whatever, and you don't feel like you're just at a loss, there is kind of a clear channel of what you can do to raise that issue with you or somebody else in college.
Yeah, I think picking up on that, I think one of the differences, again, when you apply to Oxford, is this college system, and it can be quite confusing and, you know, opaque when you apply, and, you know, sort of thinking about which college to apply to and what the college actually does. And in some senses, it is quite hard to explain. But I think the clearest thing, as Sara said, is that it's this home for you within the larger university, where you've got 7 or so other historians alongside you who you get to know really well. And you've got then a college of other undergraduates who you can play sports with or do drama with, all of those things. And then you've got us, the tutors, who are like physically in that building, who you can go and see, who, you know, are there to support you. And you know, we have dinners and social events as well, and things like that, so that we get to know you over the 3 years. So I think that's the strength of the college system. And within that, then Mansfield, why Mansfield as opposed to another college? I think hopefully you'll be watching this and thinking of Mansfield because genuinely Mansfield is a friendly, open college. We're not looking for a particular type of student. We have history students and students across the board from such a wide range of backgrounds and previous experience that we're looking to bring together a really diverse mix of people that then makes for a really interesting experience as an undergraduate. They won't be students who are all like you, and that will be really interesting and add to your exposure to the world around you. And when we think about the admissions process, don't think that you have to be a certain type of student to get offered a place. That we're looking for students who have that interest, that real urgency to really engage with history and to think critically about it, and who love reading about it and who want to really get immersed in it. But we're not looking for a particular model of an Oxford student. I think Mansfield in that regard is really open to students from all kinds of different backgrounds and experiences.
Yeah, and I think actually for me, before I applied, and specifically for the interview, I was really worried that you had to be like this really super confident person who, would just like come out with really bold answers and, just know everything, which is just not the case. Especially in the interview, you are kind of like teasing out, working through a difficult problem, and it's like a two-way street, which is quite reassuring, I think, because often you assume it's going to be the tutor asks the question and then you have to come out with a fully formed answer, and that can be really intimidating. But if you actually think if you think of it more as a conversation and you're like talking through your thought process, then it allows you to kind of interject as well and say, oh, well, have you considered this thing? And then, that helps you get closer to, the end point. Not that there's an answer usually, but yeah, I found that quite reassuring. And actually for me, it was only after the interview that I really wanted to come to Oxford. I was like, oh, that was so fun. I would love to spend 3 years like in the, having such in-depth conversations about subjects that I really enjoy. And yeah, so I think people have a lot of fears around the interview, but it can be quite a positive experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think even at the stage where you're just deciding whether to apply at all, obviously you're having those conversations with your teachers, you're thinking about your GCSE and A-level or IB or higher's, results. And if you're someone in that top bracket, then you're thinking about maybe applying for Oxford. So I would just say in that position, put in an application and just see where that leads you. Even if you don't get in, you'll go to a brilliant university and you'll have a great time there and, prove us wrong. And we only have 8 or so places for historians, so there'll be many people that who would be good enough, but we can only pick the 8. But I would say have a go at applying and don't be put off by thinking that Oxford looks for a certain type of confident or polished person, because it really doesn't. And as Sara said, there's such a range of people that we've offered places to in the past, and you can be the sort of the quietest, most introvert person, and in a way the system plays to your favour in that you've got a small group teaching where you can really develop your voice and you can be heard, and you can have a serious conversation with someone who wants to know what you think.
And I think it would be interesting to kind of hear your perspective on it, but it's almost the application process as a whole is testing very different skills in each part. So personal statement UCAS is, really demonstrating your motivation to study the course. And then the HAT is a very kind of specific type of test, and it's seeing how you approach material that you've never seen before. And then for the written work, it's how do you work with material that you do know quite well because it's something you just write for school. And then again, the interview is how do you think?
That's completely true. And I think don't be put off or worried if that one aspect of that process doesn't go the way that you want, or that you've got a few grades that you're not as proud of, because we've got all of those bits of information that we can prioritize and we can think about as a whole. So we're not sort of putting everything on the interview and that you must be this brilliant performer in the interview, for instance. And I know a lot of anxiety attaches to the interview, but actually we've had people who've been too nervous to speak or say much at all, and we still offered them a place because everything else has been great about their application. And similarly also, you know, if your school grades are good, but there's 1 or 2 blips in them, don't necessarily be put off from applying, because we have in Oxford a contextual process where we will look really carefully at which school you've been to, you know, whether there've been disruption to your teaching or anything like that, which might account for sort of a blip in your profile. So again, you know, we look really carefully at school type, school background, and all of those things to contextualise your grades. Well, we hope that's given you some kind of insight into what it might be like to apply and study at Mansfield. Between now and if you do apply, I'd say tips would be just to kind of keep extending your reading. So if there's something that you really enjoyed studying in the classroom, then just trying to ask your teacher for a tip on a book that might expand your knowledge of that topic. You could go online. There's a good resource at history.ac.uk, and you can click through there to reviews in history, and that gives you loads of nice reviews of recent history textbooks and all kinds of things there, and that just might spark your interest in something that you hadn't previously thought of. And as Sara said, also thinking about the combinations of subjects that you're taking at the moment, whether that's your A-levels or IB or higher or whatever it is that you're taking. Think about how, you know, your history studies works together with maybe a language you're studying, or English, or even some of the sciences that you might be studying. So just sort of turn that over in your mind and think about that between now and writing the UCAS form and preparing for the HAT test and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, so do apply, just give it a go, and just take that attitude that you can't lose out. You'll hopefully enjoy the process and find it intellectually stimulating, and, you know, come to see us hopefully for an interview. So yeah, do apply if you feel that you haven't been put off by this short video, and we hope to see you soon.